At my daughter-in-law's anniversary party, she said into the microphone. My mother-in-law only came because she heard there would be good food. I smiled, and on Monday I cancelled the business funding check. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I spent 3 hours getting ready for Victor and Sophia's anniversary party. At 69, it takes longer to look presentable. I carefully applied my makeup, styled my silver hair, and put on my navy blue dress. The one my late husband always said made me look elegant. I wanted to make a good impression for their special day. The venue was beautiful, a garden restaurant overlooking the Boston Harbor. String lights twinkled between the trees, waiters in crisp uniforms carried trays of champagne, and a jazz quartet played softly near the fountain. Everything radiated celebration and love, just like Victor and Sophia had dreamed. Evelyn, you made it! Sophia rushed over, giving me a warm hug. She looked stunning in her emerald dress, though I noticed tension around her eyes, her smile seeming forced. Of course I came, dear. I wouldn't miss your anniversary celebration. Sophia nodded, already scanning the crowd behind me. The Thompsons just arrived. I need to greet them. They're Victor's business partners, you know. Please enjoy the appetizers, Evelyn. I wandered through the elegant gathering, exchanging pleasantries with guests who offered polite smiles. I recognized a few faces from previous family events, but most were Victor's business associates, younger professionals with confident handshakes and ambitious eyes. I found a comfortable spot near the garden's edge with a clear view of the speaking area. The thought of all those business funding checks I'd written over the past 3 years crossed my mind. Just until the company gets established, Sophia had pleaded when they started their consulting firm. We can't secure the initial funding yet, but the contracts are coming in. It's just temporary, Evelyn. Temporary had turned into 36 monthly checks of $3,200 each, plus additional emergency funds, money from my late husband's retirement savings, meant to secure my future. I never told anyone I was helping them. Sophia insisted it would embarrass Victor if people knew about family assistance. The garden quieted as Victor took the microphone, champagne glass raised, his natural charisma commanding attention. My son-in-law had always been magnetic. That charm had initially masked the subtle dismissiveness. The way he interrupted me during family conversations, the condescending glances. I want to thank everyone for celebrating with us tonight, Victor began, his smile brilliant under the garden lights. 15 years of marriage, and what a journey it's been. I smiled genuinely, happy for their milestone. Perhaps now their business was stable enough that they could manage without my financial support. I see so many faces who've been part of our story. My business partners who believed in our vision. He gestured toward a table of executives. My colleagues who've helped us grow. More acknowledgements. And of course, my incredible wife, Sophia. Sophia beamed, raising her glass. The crowd applauded warmly, and Victor's gaze found me among the guests. Something shifted in his expression, a slight smirk appearing. I see my mother-in-law, Evelyn, is here too. Suddenly, I felt all eyes turn toward me. Heat rose in my cheeks as the attention focused my way. The mother-in-law only came because she heard there would be good food, Victor continued, his tone playful but carrying an edge I knew too well. Laughter rippled through the garden, not the warm kind shared among family, but the uncomfortable laughter that happens when someone crosses a line but holds enough social power that people feel obligated to respond. I maintained my smile, feeling it freeze on my face. 3 years of business funding. Countless checks written in secret to protect his pride. And this was how he saw me, a greedy old woman who showed up for free meals. Sophia was laughing too, though her eyes darted nervously to check my reaction. She knew. She knew exactly what that comment revealed about how Victor spoke about me in private. The attention moved away from me as Victor continued his speech. But I could no longer focus on his words over the ringing in my ears. Nearby guests avoided eye contact, a few offering sympathetic glances. When the speech ended and guests returned to mingling, I quietly gathered my purse and wrap. No one noticed as I made my way to the exit, called a taxi and left the celebration behind. The next morning, sitting at my kitchen table with my checkbook open, I stared at the blank check I'd been preparing to fill out. Victor's words echoed in my mind. For the first time, I saw clearly what I had become to them, not family. Not a supporter, just an ATM with grey hair. My hand remained steady as I wrote cancelled across the check for this month's business funding. Then I picked up my phone and scheduled a meeting with my accountant for Monday. The old Evelyn would have continued writing those checks, continued smiling through the humiliation. But something shattered inside me last night, and something stronger emerged in its place. The phone rang at 7:30 a.m. Tuesday morning, jarring me from my first restful sleep in months. Sophia's name appeared on the screen. I took a deep breath before answering. "What the hell, Evelyn?" Her voice crackled with anger. The business account transfer bounced. The bank called Victor. I sat up, adjusting my pillows against the headboard. "Good morning to you too, Sophia. This isn't a joke. Victor is furious. We have supplier payments due. Do you realize what this does to our business credit?" I looked out my bedroom window at the oak tree I'd planted with my husband 35 years ago. Its leaves were beginning their autumn transformation. "I cancelled the transfer," I said calmly. There was a moment of stunned silence before Sophia's voice returned, quieter now. "You what? Why would you do that?" "I think you know why, dear. If this is about Victor's comment at the party." "Was it a comment, Sophia? Because comments are usually thoughtless. This felt quite intentional. I didn't find it amusing to be humiliated in front of a room full of strangers." Sophia sighed dramatically. "You're overreacting. Victor was just trying to lighten the mood. That's his personality. Making fun of the woman who's been funding your business for 3 years is his personality." Another silence, longer this time. When Sophia spoke again, her voice had shifted to the coaxing tone she'd perfected over the years whenever she wanted something. "Evelyn, please. It was just one thoughtless joke. You know how Victor gets when he's nervous about public speaking. He didn't mean anything by it." I closed my eyes, remembering all the jokes over the years, Victor commenting on my outdated financial advice at Thanksgiving, Victor asking if I'd finally learned to use online banking at Christmas, Victor wondering aloud if I was still sharp enough to manage investments on my birthday. This isn't just about the party, Sophia. It's about respect, or rather the complete lack of it. So you're punishing us financially because your feelings got hurt. Her voice rose again. That's incredibly petty, Evelyn. The old Evelyn would have crumbled at that accusation. The old Evelyn would have apologized, written a new check, maybe even added extra to make up for the inconvenience. But the woman who walked out of that anniversary party 2 nights ago was no longer the same person. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm simply stopping something I should never have started. Victor's business is profitable. You both work full-time. You're both successful professionals. There's no reason I should be funding your operations. We were counting on that money." Sophia's composure was slipping, panic creeping into her voice. "We have the new office lease in Back Bay next month, and we just ordered equipment for the expansion." I felt a chill spread through my chest. "You've been using my business funding to finance expansion and luxury office space? That's not—" "I didn't mean—" Sophia stumbled over her words. "We needed that base funding so we could invest in growth opportunities. That's how business works, Evelyn." "I see." "And here I thought I was helping you stay afloat during difficult times, not subsidizing your ambitions." "You're being cruel," Sophia's voice broke, "after everything we've done for you." That stopped me short. "What exactly have you done for me, Sophia?" We include you in all our celebrations. We call you every week. Victor helped you with your computer problems last year." I almost laughed at the absurdity. "And in exchange, I've given you over 185,000 ton." The line went quiet. I could hear Sophia breathing, probably calculating her next approach. "Evelyn," she finally said, her voice honey-sweet again, "I know you're upset. Let's not let one misunderstanding damage our relationship. Why don't you come over for dinner this weekend? We can discuss this like family." "I'm not coming to dinner, Sophia. And I'm not writing any more checks." "You can't just abandon us like this." All pretense of sweetness vanished. What kind of mother-in-law turns her back on family? That word, abandon, hit me like a physical blow. For a moment, I was back in that garden restaurant, frozen under the attention while strangers laughed at Victor's joke. "I haven't abandoned anyone," I said quietly. "I've just stopped being exploited. Your son would be so disappointed in you." My late son's memory was her final weapon, one she knew would wound me deepest. But instead of pain, I felt a strange clarity. "No, Sophia. David would be disappointed that his wife is treating his mother this way." I heard a sharp intake of breath, then the sound of a door slamming in the background. "Victor wants to speak with you," Sophia said curtly. "Tell Victor I said congratulations again on your anniversary. Now he can finally fund his own business." I hung up before she could respond. My hands were trembling, but my mind felt clearer than it had in years. I knew this wasn't over. They wouldn't let go of their financial lifeline without a fight. But for the first time since David died, I felt like myself again. The phone immediately rang again. I turned it off and went to make a cup of tea. Whatever storm was coming, I would face it on my terms, not theirs. 3 days of blessed silence ended when my doorbell rang Thursday afternoon. I peered through the peephole to find my neighbor Daniel standing on the porch, hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. Unlike Sophia, Daniel had always been the mediator in family situations. "Hey, Evelyn," he said when I opened the door, leaning in to kiss my cheek. "Got time for coffee?" I studied his face so much like David's and saw the tension around his eyes. "Sophia called you, didn't she?" Daniel sighed, running a hand through his greying hair. "Can we talk inside?" In the kitchen, I busied myself making coffee while Daniel sat at the table, fidgeting with a napkin. My neighbor had never been good at hiding his feelings. "Sophia's pretty upset," he finally said as I set a steaming mug in front of him. "I imagine she is." I took the seat across from him. "Did she tell you why?" Daniel nodded. "She said you cut off their business funding because of some joke Victor made. She thinks you're overreacting." "And what do you think?" He stared into his coffee. "I think there's probably more to the story." I told him everything: the 3 years of business funding, the countless emergency loans that were never repaid, and finally the public humiliation at the anniversary party. Daniel's face darkened. "That was a lousy thing for Victor to say." "Yes, it was." I wrapped my hands around my mug, drawing comfort from its warmth. "But it was also revealing. It showed me exactly what they think of me. Still, Evelyn, cutting off the funding without warning, that's pretty harsh." I raised an eyebrow. "Did you know I was funding their business?" He had the grace to look embarrassed. "Sophia mentioned something once about you helping them out." "Did she mention I've given them over $185,000? Daniel's eyes widened. "Jesus, Evelyn." "No, she definitely didn't mention that part." "And did you know they've been using that money to fund office expansions and luxury equipment?" He shook his head, looking increasingly uncomfortable. "Daniel, I'm not cutting them off to be cruel. I'm cutting them off because I've finally realized I'm being used." My neighbor was quiet for a long moment. "Sophia said David would have wanted you to help them." The manipulation was so transparent it almost made me laugh. David would have wanted his wife to stand on her own 2 feet. He worked hard so I would be taken care of in my old age. Not so Sophia and Victor could have fancy offices. Daniel nodded slowly, then hesitated. "There's something else you should know." My stomach tightened. "What?" "Victor. He talks about you sometimes when you're not around." Daniel wouldn't meet my eyes. Not very nicely. "What does he say?" Daniel shifted in his seat. "Just jokes about how you're always checking on their business expenses. How you're tight with your money." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Tight? I've given them $185,000. I know, Evelyn. I didn't know about all that until today." "What else does he say?" Daniel's discomfort was obvious. "It's not important." "It is to me." He sighed. "He calls you the Bank of Evelyn. Says you're keeping records of every dollar so you can control them someday." Each word was a knife twist. "And Sophia? Does she correct him when he says these things?" Daniel's silence was answer enough. The doorbell rang again, saving him from having to respond. I opened it to find my neighbor Lillian holding a casserole dish. "Evelyn, I made too much beef stew. Thought you might like some." I invited her in, grateful for the interruption. Lillian had been my friend for 25 years. A straight-talking widow who never minced words. After quick introductions, Lillian settled at the table while I made her coffee. Daniel, clearly relieved by the buffer, asked about her volunteer work. "It's going well, though not as rewarding as Evelyn's medical work used to be," Lillian said, then lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Actually, Evelyn, I've been meaning to talk to you about something I overheard at the community center last month." I tensed, sensing what was coming. "That son-in-law of yours was there, Victor, right? Charming fellow, but my goodness, what a mouth on him." Lillian shook her head. "He was telling some folks by the coffee station about your retirement funds. Calling you, and I apologize for repeating this, a walking ATM with dentures." Daniel looked stricken. "He didn't." "I'm afraid he did," Lillian confirmed. "Said something about how convenient it was having a mother-in-law with a fat pension and no one else to spend it on." The room fell silent. I stood at the counter, my back to them, fighting to control my emotions. "Evelyn, I'm so sorry," Daniel finally said. "I had no idea it was that bad." I turned around, surprised to find I felt more resolved than hurt. Well, now we all know exactly where we stand. Lillian reached over and patted my hand. You know what my Robert used to say? When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. I nodded, suddenly grateful for Victor's public joke. Without it, I might have continued writing those checks for years, blind to the contempt behind their grateful smiles. Daniel stayed for another hour. When he left, he hugged me tightly. I'll talk to Sophia, he promised. This isn't right. I watched him drive away, not holding out much hope. Sophia had always been stubborn, and she'd married a man who matched her in that regard. That night, I pulled out the box of financial records I'd been keeping meticulously for years. Check after check, transfer after transfer, all neatly documented with dates and amounts. Some for business operations, some for emergencies that somehow always coincided with expensive purchases. As I leafed through the papers, a cold realization settled over me. This wasn't just about one insulting joke. This was about years of being taken advantage of by the people who should have cared for me most. It was time to close the Bank of Evelyn permanently. I spent the next morning at First National Bank with Margaret, the financial advisor who had helped me manage my money since David's passing. She peered at me over her glasses as I explained the situation. Let me get this straight, Evelyn. You've been funding your daughter-in-law's business for 3 years without telling anyone? I nodded, feeling embarrassed now that I was saying it out loud. And you want to know the total amount you've provided them? Yes. I've kept records, but I want to make sure I haven't missed anything. Margaret typed rapidly on her keyboard, her lips thinning as she reviewed my accounts. Evelyn, there are numerous transfers here, not just the monthly business funding. She turned the monitor so I could see. Besides the $3,200 monthly business payments, there were dozens of other transfers. $8,000 for Sophia's car lease, $4,500 for Victor's professional development course, $12,000 for their office equipment emergency, $7,200 for business insurance. Do you remember authorizing all these? My stomach clenched as I nodded. Each one had come with an urgent phone call, a detailed explanation of why they needed the money immediately. Each time I'd transferred the funds without question. Evelyn, adding everything up, the business funding, and these other transfers, you've given them approximately 185,000 toslens over the past 3 years. The number hit me like a physical blow. I knew it was substantial, but hearing the total made me lightheaded. That's about 40% of your retirement savings, Margaret said gently. I gripped the edge of her desk, trying to steady myself. I had no idea it was that much. Margaret removed her glasses, her expression softening. Evelyn, I've been meaning to discuss this pattern with you for a while. This level of financial support isn't sustainable for someone on a fixed income. At this rate, you'll exhaust your savings within 6 years. 6 years. I was only 69. With modern healthcare, I could easily live another 15 years or more. The reality of my situation crashed down on me. What should I do? My voice sounded small even to my own ears. First, you need to stop the transfers, which you've already done. Second, you might want to consider consulting with an elder law attorney about protecting your assets. Do you think that's necessary? Margaret hesitated. Evelyn, when family members become accustomed to accessing someone's funds this way, they rarely stop willingly. I thought of Sophia's reaction on the phone, her immediate shift to accusations and emotional manipulation, rather than understanding or gratitude for what I'd already provided. I'll make an appointment, I said firmly. Back home, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the document Margaret had printed out, a complete record of every dollar I'd given to Sophia and Victor. It was a staggering amount, far more than I'd realized. No wonder they'd become so comfortable with their lifestyle. I'd been subsidizing it all along. The doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Sophia, arms crossed, foot tapping impatiently. I took a deep breath before opening the door. We need to talk, she said, pushing past me without waiting for an invitation. I followed her into the living room where she paced like a caged animal. Daniel says you think we've been exploiting you financially, she said accusingly. Haven't you? Sophia stopped pacing, her face flushing. We've had some business challenges. You offered to help. Did I offer or did you ask? I picked up Margaret's printout. Did I offer to give you $185,000? Sophia blinked, momentarily thrown. It can't possibly be that much. It is. I have the records right here. She regained her composure quickly. So what? You're financially secure, Evelyn. David left you well provided for. What else are you going to spend it on? Perhaps my own future care, medical expenses when I'm older, or just things that bring me joy rather than funding your business ambitions? Sophia's expression hardened. This is about Victor's stupid joke, isn't it? You're punishing us because your feelings got hurt. This isn't about punishment. It's about realizing I've been taken advantage of. Taken advantage of? Sophia laughed bitterly. You've lived in this house for decades. Your mortgage is paid off. You have minimal expenses except your hobbies and basic living costs. And that entitles you to my savings? We're family. Family supports each other. Where was that family spirit when Victor was mocking me at your anniversary party? Where was it when he called me a walking ATM with dentures behind my back? Sophia's eyes widened slightly, confirmation that she knew about that comment. He was just being funny. No, Sophia. People are funny when everyone can laugh together. Victor clearly finds financial exploitation amusing. Exploitation? That's ridiculous. We were going to pay you back. I raised an eyebrow. When? She faltered. When the business became more profitable. Your business is profitable. You both earn substantial incomes. You have expensive offices and luxury equipment. When exactly were you planning to become independent? The front door opened and Victor walked in without knocking. His face was flushed with anger. There you are, he said to Sophia. I told you not to come here alone. I don't recall inviting either of you, I said calmly. Victor turned to me, his charm completely absent. Look, Evelyn, this has gone on long enough. We need that business funding. I held up the financial document. Did you know you and Sophia have taken $185,000 from me in the last 3 years? He glanced at the paper, unimpressed. So what? You're not exactly struggling financially. And it's not like you have anyone else to spend it on. The callousness of his response left me speechless. Sophia, perhaps sensing she was losing control of the situation, tried a different approach. Evelyn, we're family. We've always been there for you. Remember when you had that medical scare last year? Who drove you to all those appointments? You did, I acknowledged. After I called you repeatedly, and you complained the entire time about missing work. Sophia flushed. Victor stepped forward, his voice dropping to that persuasive tone he used on clients. Evelyn, you have to understand our position. We've built a business based on certain financial assumptions. You can't just pull the foundation out from under us. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw clearly for the first time the calculating man behind the charming facade. I'm not pulling any foundation, Victor. I'm simply closing my checkbook. And what about our business, he demanded. Our growth plans? That sounds like a problem for you to solve. I stood up, signaling the conversation was over. Now, unless you're here to thank me for the $185,000 I've already given you, I think you should leave. Victor's face darkened. You'll regret this, Evelyn. You're not as independent as you think. The threat hung in the air as I showed them to the door. As I closed it behind them, I realized my hands were steady, my heartbeat calm. The old Evelyn would have been distraught, desperate to mend fences at any cost. But the woman who stood in the quiet house listening to their car speed angrily out of the driveway was no longer afraid of their disapproval. She was too busy rediscovering her dignity. The weeks following my confrontation with Sophia and Victor brought a cold silence I hadn't experienced since my husband's death. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits demanding money. According to Daniel, they were reassessing their strategy, which I took to mean plotting their next approach. I used the quiet to reclaim my life. First, I met with Catherine Walsh, an elder law attorney recommended by Margaret, a sharp woman in her 50s who listened to my story without judgment. Unfortunately, what you're describing is common, she said. Family financial exploitation of seniors is widespread, especially when there's a substantial retirement account involved. I wouldn't call it exploitation exactly, I started, then stopped myself. That was the old Evelyn talking, making excuses, minimizing the hurt. Catherine's eyes softened. Evelyn, if someone else told you this story about a widow whose daughter-in-law and her husband took $185,000 from her, and then mocked her behind her back, what would you call it? I swallowed hard. Exploitation. Exactly. And it rarely stops on its own. She leaned forward. Let's talk about protecting your assets. By the end of our meeting, I had a clear plan revising my will, setting up a trust with Daniel as co-trustee, and creating financial power of attorney documents that explicitly excluded Sophia and Victor from making decisions for me. What about my house? I asked. It's the most valuable thing I own. Catherine nodded. We can place it in the trust as well. That way, no one can pressure you to sell it or take out loans against it. As I left her office, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For years, I'd carried the burden of keeping Sophia and Victor's business afloat. Now I was taking steps to protect myself, not just my money, but my dignity. I decided to redirect my energy to things that brought me joy. The Community Senior Services Program had been asking for volunteers with medical background. With newfound resolve, I called Patricia, the coordinator, and volunteered to help with health education workshops. "Evelyn, we'd love to have you," she exclaimed. "We meet Thursdays at the community centre." That Thursday, I found myself surrounded by a group of engaged seniors, all eager to learn about managing their health and navigating healthcare systems. "Remember, you have the right to ask questions about any medication," I explained during the session. "Your pharmacist and doctor should explain everything clearly." "Excellent point," said Theodore, a retired professor with kind eyes and a warm smile. "I always forget to ask about drug interactions." For 2 hours, we discussed health advocacy and wellness strategies, my background in medical administration proving unexpectedly valuable. By the time we broke for refreshments, I felt more useful than I had in years. "You certainly know your healthcare systems," Theodore commented as he handed me a cup of tea. "My husband and I both worked in medical fields," I explained. "After he died, I kept up with the changes. It helps me feel connected to that part of my life." Theodore nodded understandingly. "My Elizabeth passed 6 years ago. Healthcare was her expertise too." We chatted easily, discovering shared interests beyond healthcare. Classical music, historical documentaries, traveling. For the first time in ages, I was having a conversation that didn't revolve around someone else's financial needs or problems. As weeks passed, my involvement with the Senior Services Program deepened. I helped develop educational materials, assisted with insurance workshops, and found myself looking forward to the Thursday meetings with an enthusiasm I hadn't felt in a long time. Theodore often walked me to my car afterward, our conversations growing longer each week. One evening, my phone rang unexpectedly. Sophia's name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath before answering. "Evelyn." Her voice was softer than the last time we'd spoken. "How are you?" "I'm well, thank you," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "How are you?" "We're managing." A pause. "Actually, that's why I'm calling. Victor and I have been talking, and we think it's time we all sat down together. We'd like to invite you to dinner on Saturday." I hesitated. This sudden olive branch seemed suspicious after weeks of silence. "Just dinner, Evelyn," Sophia continued, her voice taking on that persuasive quality I knew so well. A chance to clear the air. No pressure, no agenda. But I knew Sophia. There was always an agenda. Who else will be there? Just us. We thought it should be intimate, family only. I thought about Catherine's warnings about continued manipulation attempts. I thought about the $185,000 already gone. I thought about walking ATM with dentures. "I'd be happy to come to dinner," I said finally. Sophia exhaled audibly. "Wonderful. 7 o'clock. Victor is making his specialty pasta dish." After hanging up, I sat quietly considering the invitation. This wasn't a peace offering. It was a tactical move. They'd had time to realize that angry confrontations wouldn't work, so now they were shifting to a gentler approach. The goal remained the same: access to my money. I called Daniel to get his perspective. "They invited you to dinner?" He sounded surprised. "That's interesting timing." "What do you mean?" "Well," he hesitated, "I probably shouldn't say anything, but Victor's been having some issues with the business. Some clients haven't paid their invoices, and their landlord is demanding the security deposit for the new office space." I absorbed this information, the pieces falling into place. Of course they wanted to clear the air now. They needed me again. "I told Sophia I'd come," I said. "Are you sure that's a good idea, Evelyn?" "Yes," I said firmly, "but I'll be going in with my eyes wide open." The night of the dinner, I dressed carefully in a burgundy blouse and black slacks, elegant but not trying too hard. I brought a bottle of wine, not the expensive kind I would have chosen before, but a respectable mid-range selection. As I drove to their home, the beautiful townhouse with the business I'd been funding, I felt oddly calm. The old Evelyn would have been anxious, desperate to smooth things over at any cost. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone who knew her own worth. I parked on the street, noticing how pristine their landscaping looked. The emergency maintenance I'd funded last spring had certainly yielded beautiful results. Sophia opened the door before I could ring the bell, greeting me with an enthusiastic hug that felt rehearsed. "Evelyn, you look wonderful." Come in, come in." Victor appeared in the hallway, all smiles and charm, as if our last encounter had never happened. "Evelyn, so good to see you. Can I take your coat? That wine looks delicious." I handed him the bottle, meeting his gaze steadily. His smile faltered slightly before he recovered. "Dinner's almost ready. Why don't we have a drink in the living room first?" I followed them into their perfectly appointed living room, noting the new artwork, likely the investment pieces Sophia had mentioned during our argument. I sat on the edge of the sofa, declining Victor's offer of a cocktail in favor of water. "So," I said pleasantly, "you wanted to clear the air." Sophia and Victor exchanged glances. The trap was set. Now it was time to see if I would walk into it willingly, or if I had finally learned to recognize the bait. Victor cleared his throat, setting his wine glass down with calculated precision. "Evelyn, we've had some time to reflect on everything that's happened." "Yes," Sophia chimed in, her voice honeyed with false sincerity. "We realize there's been a breakdown in communication." I sipped my water, waiting. Years of experience had taught me that when Sophia said communication, she meant compliance. "The truth is," Victor continued, leaning forward with practiced earnestness, "we never fully expressed our gratitude for your support of our business. That was wrong of us." "It was," I agreed calmly. My simple acknowledgement seemed to throw him off script momentarily. He glanced at Sophia, who smoothly took over. "Evelyn, family supports each other. That's what David always believed. And yes, maybe we've relied on your generosity too much, but we're working on becoming more self-sufficient." "I'm glad to hear that." Victor nodded, his confidence returning. "Exactly. And that's why we wanted to have this dinner, to show you we're taking responsibility." The oven timer chimed, and Sophia excused herself to check on dinner. Victor immediately shifted closer to me on the sofa. "Evelyn, between us," he lowered his voice, "Sophia has been devastated by this rift. She loses sleep, worried she's damaged her relationship with David's mother." I met his gaze steadily. "How concerning for her." "The thing is," he continued, not registering my lack of emotional response, "we've hit a temporary cash flow issue. Just short-term, of course. The business is solid, but some major clients are delayed on payments. It's created a brief funding gap." There it was, the real reason for the dinner invitation. "What about your business savings?" I asked innocently. Victor's expression flickered. "Well, with the expansion costs, our reserves are tied up in growth investments." "And the new office lease? Did that impact your cash flow?" His eyes narrowed slightly. "Sophia mentioned that, did she?" "She did." Sophia returned, announcing dinner was ready. We moved to the dining room, where she'd prepared an elaborate table setting, complete with my grandmother's silver, which I'd given her years ago, gleaming under candlelight. "Wine, Evelyn," Sophia offered, already pouring. "No, thank you. I'm driving." "You could always stay over," she suggested. "We could have a nice breakfast tomorrow. Continue our conversation." I smiled. "That's thoughtful, but I have commitments in the morning." "Oh." Sophia looked genuinely surprised that I might have a life beyond their needs. "What commitments?" "I've joined the Senior Services Volunteer Program. We're preparing health education materials tomorrow." Victor served the pasta, which was admittedly delicious. As we ate, Sophia steered the conversation to neutral topics: Daniel's work, upcoming community events, neighborhood news. It was almost like old times, except for the undercurrent of tension. After dinner, as Sophia cleared the plates, Victor disappeared briefly, returning with a leather portfolio. My instincts immediately went on alert. "Evelyn," he began, setting the portfolio on the table, "we've been thinking about your financial situation." "My financial situation is perfectly fine, thank you." He pushed forward, undeterred. "We've prepared some projections, looking at your retirement income, your projected expenses, and what you could reasonably contribute to family investments without impacting your lifestyle." I stared at him, astonished by his audacity. "You did what?" Sophia quickly rejoined us, placing a hand on my arm. "Evelyn, we're just trying to help. We know financial planning can be complex at our age." I gently but firmly removed her hand. "I'm 69, not 99, and I have a financial advisor who helps me manage my money quite competently." Victor opened the portfolio, revealing business projections and charts. "According to our analysis, you could easily contribute $3,000 monthly without affecting your standard of living. That's less than before, you'll note." The sheer presumption took my breath away. They weren't even pretending this dinner was about reconciliation anymore. "And this would be for strategic family investments," Sophia said quickly. "Not just business funding, future healthcare expenses, education funds for potential grandchildren, family travel, investments in our shared future. I looked from one expectant face to the other, a calm clarity settling over me. No. Victor blinked. Excuse me? No, I repeated, folding my napkin neatly. I will not be contributing $3,000 monthly or any other amount to your household or business. Sophia's facade cracked. Evelyn, be reasonable. We've worked so hard on this plan. I can see that, I replied, gesturing to the portfolio. But my answer is still no. Victor's charm vanished entirely. This is the thanks we get? After we've welcomed you into our lives, treated you like family? Treated me like family? I raised an eyebrow. You mean like when you publicly humiliated me at your anniversary party? Or when you called me a walking ATM with dentures behind my back? That was a joke, he protested, though his eyes shifted away guiltily. No, Victor. A joke is something everyone can laugh at together. What you did was mockery at the expense of someone who had given you $185,000. Sophia's eyes widened. It wasn't that much. It was exactly that much. I have the records. Victor's face hardened. You've always been controlling, Evelyn. Always keeping track, counting every penny. No wonder David worked himself to death. Living with someone so rigid must have been exhausting. The mention of my late son, twisted into a weapon, should have wounded me deeply. Instead, I felt a strange sense of liberation. They had finally dropped all pretense. I stood up. Thank you for dinner. It was illuminating. Sophia jumped up. You're leaving? Just like that? Yes, just like that. What about family? She demanded, tears welling in her eyes. What about loyalty? I've been loyal for years, I said gently. I've supported you financially, emotionally, in every way a mother-in-law could. But loyalty goes both ways, Sophia, and respect is non-negotiable. Victor snorted. Great speech. Very dramatic. What happens when you need us? When you're older? More dependent, unable to care for yourself? I met his gaze squarely. I'll manage just as I've always managed. Sophia followed me to the door, her composure crumbling. Evelyn, please. We can work something out. A smaller amount, maybe. I turned to face my daughter-in-law one last time. Sophia, I will always care about you because you were David's choice. My door is always open if you want to visit as family, not as financial dependents. But the Bank of Evelyn is permanently closed. I left them standing in the doorway, Sophia crying theatrically. Victor's face darkened with fury. As I drove away, I felt no sadness, only the peaceful certainty that I had finally done the right thing. 6 months later, I stood in the community centre, surveying the health education display with pride. Brochures on medication management, insurance navigation, and wellness programs created a comprehensive resource that had helped dozens of seniors advocate for better healthcare. It's wonderful, Theodore said beside me, his hand warm on my shoulder. Over the months, our friendship had deepened into something more companionship, support, and eventually a gentle romance that had surprised us both. The diabetes support group loves your medication tracking sheets, he continued. The nurse said they're the best resource she's seen. I smiled, remembering how David had always encouraged my attention to detail in medical matters. The thought brought a familiar warmth, but no longer the sharp grief of before. My phone buzzed with a text message from Daniel. Lunch tomorrow at 1 p.m. Looking forward to catching up. I typed back a quick confirmation. My relationship with my neighbour had strengthened over the past months as he'd witnessed my transformation. He'd even started bringing his elderly father to our health workshops. A genuine desire for community connection, not a financial strategy. Sophia and Victor had eventually closed their expensive office, scaling back to something within their actual means. We spoke occasionally, careful conversations where Sophia avoided any mention of money. It wasn't the warm relationship I'd once hoped for, but it was honest, and that was worth more than false harmony. Penny for your thoughts? Theodore asked, just reflecting on how much has changed since that anniversary party. He nodded understandingly. Theodore knew my story. I'd shared it one evening over tea in his apartment. Rather than judgment, he'd offered perspective. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for others is to stop enabling their poor choices. As we walked through the community centre, greeting other volunteers and program participants, I felt a deep contentment settle in my bones. My retirement fund was secure, growing modestly under Margaret's watchful eye. My house was protected in the trust Catherine had established. My days were filled with purpose and genuine connections. That terrible moment at Victor's anniversary party, standing frozen while strangers laughed, had been a gift in disguise. It had forced me to see what I'd been blind to for years, that true dignity comes not from what we give others, but from what we refuse to surrender. As Theodore and I left the community centre hand in hand, planning our dinner and an evening of classical music at the local concert hall, I realised I was happier at 69 than I'd been in years, not because I had more, but because I had finally recognised my own worth. The Bank of Evelyn was closed forever. But Evelyn herself, she was flourishing.